Hey, what's going on guys? My name is Anson and welcome to a brand new video. So in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to build a Discord bot that allows users to use commands that are only for people who have purchased the premium commands. I mean, you may have seen, some Discord bots where they have quote-unquote premium commands or commands that are only for customers, people who have purchased, the product, right? And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to build out a front end, and we're also going to have a back end as well, and we're going to have a Discord bot. So there's going to be a total of about 3 total repositories for this project. And what we want to do is we want to use Stripe for the payment processing. So Stripe, if you haven't heard of Stripe before, Stripe is very popular, and it has a really nice API that you can use to integrate your application with payments. So the way that it's going to work is the user is going to basically log in to the application. When they log in, they're going to see this simple page. They're going to see purchase premium commands, and they're going to enter their card number, expiration date, and zip code. Now, all of this stuff that you see, the forms, that's all going to be provided by Stripe. So we're not actually going to be collecting the actual credit card numbers. Stripe is going to provide us these elements, and they're actually just iframes. And so whenever you submit stuff, whenever you submit the details, it actually goes to Stripe and it never goes to your server, which is actually what you want, because you don't want to actually have the users enter in their credit card details. You can actually get into a lot of legal trouble with that, especially in the United States. Okay, but yeah, so when they enter their card details, it's going to send that request to Stripe, and then we're going to have to handle that ourselves. And once the payment goes through, what we're going to do is we're going to save everything in the backend, and the user is going to be able to use the commands, because what's going to happen is on the backend, we're going to have a status for the user. It's going to say, hey, look, this user has paid for the command, let them use it. Or this user has paid for the product, they can use these commands. Okay, as we build this out, it'll actually make a lot more sense, but I'm actually really excited because it's going to be quite some fun. For the tech stack, we're going to use React, we're going to use Nest.js, and we're going to use MySQL. That's pretty much going to be all the things that we'll use. So React is going to be obviously for the front end. For the back end, it's going to be Nest.js, and we're going to use MySQL for the database, and obviously Node.js. Okay, so a couple notes that I want to mention is that we're not going to spend too much time on the front end. We're really just going to have a simple page that just says login. When they click login, they'll be redirected to this page. If the user paid for the commands, or whatever it is that you're purchasing, or that you are having them purchase, if they did not pay for the commands, they'll see this form over here. If they did pay, then we'll probably just display something else. Okay, but again, like, this isn't really a dashboard tutorial. Maybe what we'll do is we'll probably use the same code that we end up building from this tutorial for future tutorials for dashboards. Okay, but for now we're going to focus on just this. So without further ado, I think that's really all we'll need to worry about. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set up the code for the project folder. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go into the Windows terminal, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder, and I'll call this, let's see, I'll call this Discord Stripe integration. Actually, I want to call this something else. I'm going to call this Discord premium commands. I'm going to CD there. So I'm going to open up the folder, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use a tool called Lerna, and it's going to allow me to manage this this folder as a mono repo. It's just going to be a lot easier. So I'm going to do Lerna init, and this will create a lerna.json file. And what's going to happen is we're going to have one folder, but inside this folder we're going to have 3 repositories, so that way I can actually run everything all in one go, and it's going to be easier to manage. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to get rid of this folder, and we're going to remove this from the packages inside learner.json. Okay, and you're going to see why I'm going to be using this, because it's actually really cool. So I'm going to go ahead and generate a React app with create React app. So we'll call this let's call it a premium commands React. Okay, so we're going to have the front end. Oh wait, whoops, forgot to do one thing. I want to use TypeScript. So let me go ahead and do that. So let me also just go in here. I'm going to open up another terminal underneath, and I'm just going to create a new Nest project. So obviously make sure you have Nest.js installed. You can do that by typing npm i-g nest CLI or @nest CLI. All right, so we have our React app set up already. So next, you also want to make sure you have Nest.js installed. The easy way to get your Nest.js project set up is by installing the CLI tool. So you can actually just go to the documentation, and you can just copy and paste this command. Just type npm install -g @nest.js/CLI. Okay. Once you have that tool installed, you can just simply run nest new, and I'm going to call this Discord premium. And I'll call this Nest.js API. Or wait, actually, what did I call the front end? Did I call it premium Reacts? Let me actually call it this Nest new premium commands API. Okay, and for the package manager, we will use Yarn, and that should take some time to install. Let's see. Yeah, I accidentally did this. Let me actually remove this. Or actually, wait. Okay, yeah, this is the wrong one. We want to remove the Nest.js API. Okay, so just give it a couple of seconds for it to finish installing. And for the Discord bot, I am going to be using my own tool, Slappy, but I'll worry about that later. Okay, we'll worry about the Discord bot stuff later. You actually don't even need to use Slappy if you don't want to, but I think it'll be easier. Okay, so we have our Nest.js app set up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and type in the packages, or you want to make sure that you look into your package.json file, and whatever name that package is, it's usually going to be the same name as the folder. So for example, if I paste premium commands React like this, it should work. So what's going to happen is a learner will look inside this .json file, and it can pretty much like do stuff like run scripts in every single package. Like for example, I can run every single start script for every package. Okay, but you want to make sure you specify the package first. Okay, so premium commands API. Okay, and we want to make sure that if these are in subfolders as well, you want to specify the actual like relative path too. Okay, and one more thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go inside the package.json file for the Nest.js app, and I'm actually just going to get rid of the I'm going to actually get rid of this start script. And actually, you know what? Let me see. Because what I want to do is I want to actually rename one of the scripts. But I think the best thing to do is I'll actually just get rid of the start script, and I'll rename this start dev to start. Okay, and watch this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead, and if I type learner run start, so the name of the command, so that's the reason why I changed the command in the Nest.js project in the package.json file, because I want to run the start script, but I also want to make sure it's in watch mode, so that way it restarts every single time I make changes. So we do learner run start, and we're going to specify the parallel flag. Okay, so you can see that the React app is now running, and you can also see that the Nest.js app is running as well. The Nest.js app is running on, I think, port 3001, I believe. Let me double check. No, it's not 3000, so I think it should have thrown an error saying that I'm surprised it didn't throw an error, or maybe it went to a different port. I'm not too sure, but let's actually fix that real quick. So Let's go over here. Let's change this to port 3001. So the Nest.js app should, yeah, I think maybe, I'm not sure what exactly happened. Let me actually wrap this in the try catch real quick. Just to see if it threw an error. Seems like it did, which is really weird. Okay. So let me go and just console log real quick, just so that I can, like see everything. Okay, good. Okay, we're not gonna worry about the backend for now. We're gonna focus on the front end. Okay, which is just going to be the React app. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and open up a terminal real quick, and I'm gonna cd into premium commands React. And I'm going to install a couple dependencies. So I'm going to first install styled components, and later we're going to have to install the dependencies for Stripe. We'll worry about the Stripe dependencies when we actually get to Stripe. For now, we're only going to install styled components, and we'll also install React router DOM, and then we'll also install the types for these two dependencies. Okay, I think that's probably all we'll need. We'll also need Axios too. Okay, I'll just install all of the main dependencies first. Okay, so let's just install the types. So styled components, types, let's see, Axios, and then types, React router DOM. Okay, so that should be it for dependencies. I don't think we need anything else aside from these Stripe elements, but like I said, we'll install that later when we actually get to the Stripe stuff. For now, we're only going to just build out the simple page, which is, like, we're not going to worry so much about CSS. We're not really going to worry so much about design right now. We're only just going to have a simple page that just has a login button, and that's really going to be it. And then when they visit the actual authenticator route, they'll see like that form. Okay, so the React app is running, which is good. Let me go ahead and delete some stuff real quick. I'm just going to get rid of all the things that we won't really need. So for example, the app.css file, I'm going to get rid of that. I'll get rid of this import React because we don't need that right now. I'll get rid of all of this stuff and this stuff. And I'll delete the logo.svg as well because we won't need that. And I'll get rid of the test file as well because we won't really need that for now. Okay, so let's go inside the index.css file, and what I want to do is I want to actually get the colors real quick so we can actually make our app look very similar. So let me actually get the background color. So I'm going to go into Figma, and I'll type background color, and that'll be this color. So you can see that it reflects over there. Awesome. So the app.tsx file currently is empty, or it doesn't really have anything that is returned aside from an empty div. So we're going to actually need a simple landing page. So this could pretty much be your landing page that the users are going to visit. So if you have a website for your bot, they're going to see this page. They're going to see all the details of your bot and what it does and why they should pay for the premium features, right? So you can obviously worry about styling that yourself. What I'm going to do is I'll set up a pages folder and also set up a components folder. So all of the pages will, go inside pages, and all the components will go inside components. So for each page, I'm going to create its own dedicated folder. So I'll call this, let's see, the landing page, and I'll call this landing, let's see, just do landing page.tsx. Okay, and for this, what I'll do is I will create a simple landing page, and really all it's going to have, it's just going to have a div, and what it's going to do is it's just going to have a button that just says login. It's just going to be really basic. Okay, so let's see what it looks like. Login, and we'll set up React router right now too, might as well. So let me go ahead and import browser router as router, run React router DOM. And we're going to take the app and wrap that, and we're going to take that and wrap it with router. And we're going to go into app.tsx, and we're going to set up a switch. I'm not sure why IntelliSense doesn't work with React router, but it's a little bit weird, but it's fine. Okay, and we're gonna import route. So for the home path, we're gonna set the component to be landing page. Or is it supposed to be component? Wait, what's going on here? Let's see. Oh wait, I forgot to return. I always forget that. Yeah, because it's not returning anything right now. It's just is it div? Right, there we go. That should fix that. So if I go over here, if I go not here, if I go over here, if I refresh, I should see the button, which is good. And like I said, you can do whatever you want. We're not going to worry about styling that right now because I don't want to make this tutorial long. Okay, and we're going to create another page, and I guess I'll call this dashboard. Dashboard page.tsx, and this is obviously going to be an authenticator route, which we will worry about that when we get to the authentication. That we're going to require the backend for that to work. Okay, so we're going to have a dashboard route, and we're going to create the dashboard component right now. And like I said, the dashboard page is going to be a simple page that has the form, the Stripe elements form. Okay, so let's just type dashboard for now. And let's just import that. Okay, so if I go to port 3000/dashboard, I should see some text, though it's camouflage because the background is dark. Let me go ahead and set the color. There we go. That's better. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and just build out the nav bar, I guess. I know I said we are not going to focus so much on CSS, but at the very least, I want to definitely implement the form and make it look nice, as well as the nav bar. It's just a landing page. I'll let you guys worry about that because, you know, everyone's landing page is different. But if we have time, I'll probably build one out. So I'll go ahead and create a simple navbar.tsx file. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a styles folder. And this is where I'm going to have all of my general styles. So, for example, the navbar styles are going to go over here. So this is where we're going to actually use styled components. So inside index.tsx, inside the styles folder, styles/index.tsx, I'm going to go ahead and create a styled component. So I'll call this navbar styled. And this is literally just going to be the navbar, but styled. And inside the actual navbar.tsx file, we're going to return this component with the contents inside of it. So all of the nav links. So for the navbar, we're going to use the semantic element nav. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the height to maybe 70 pixels. I'm going to give it a border. I'm going to give it a border on the bottom. So border bottom. I'll do 1 pixel solid, and then we'll do a white color, but we're going to give it an opacity of, let's say, maybe as low as possible. Though actually, then it's probably going to be problematic. Well, we'll play around with it later. Okay, so that should give us the border. I think we want everything to be centered, so there's a couple ways you could do that. I think what I'll do is I'll use a flexbox, and I'll use justify content. And also use align items, set it to center. So that's going to be, so all the contents are going to be centered vertically and horizontally. So let's go ahead and create the navbar component now. So inside the navbar component, we're going to return navbar styled, and literally everything, all of the nav links are going to go inside here. So for example, for now, I'm just going to go ahead and I'll just use a div. And I'll just say, let's just call this home. Okay, let's go inside app.tsx, and what we're going to do is we're going to render the navbar. We actually want to render it after the dashboard. So this is actually going to be a little bit tricky because if we actually put the navbar, inside, or if we put the navbar with this switch, it's actually going to render for every single route, but we don't want it to render for the landing page. So this is actually going to be a little bit tricky. But for now, what we'll do is we'll actually just leave it like this. So let me actually create a fragment. And the navbar, for now, the navbar will be on every single route, but we'll fix that later when we actually have our API. Okay, so not sure why IntelliSense doesn't want to pick that up, but that should, yep, there we go. Okay, so let's look at the nav bar right now. There you go, we have the nav bar. It doesn't look so nice. We could go ahead and import a font real quick, so let me go ahead and get the font that I want to use. The font that we'll use is going to be called Poppins, right over here. I like this font a lot. We'll just select the light and regular, and we'll copy this, and we'll go inside the public folder inside index.html, and we'll paste it over here. Okay. So now we should be able to use Poppins. So what I'll do is I will set the font family to Poppins. And now if I go here, I should have home. Okay, perfect. Now I do want to do one more thing. Let me go into the style component. Let me actually lower the opacity of the border real quick. I think that's better. I think it's okay. Okay, so you can actually see right now that we have the nav bar, but if I go here, you can see the nav bar is still there. We can actually probably not render the nav bar in the app, but instead what we could probably do is we can create another. We can probably create another component, and inside that component can actually have the nav bar inside over here. So for example, what I can do is I can probably just move that nav bar here. Okay, so you can see that right now it doesn't get rendered here, but I can actually, let me actually create another switch, and let me see what happens here. So the main page works, but I go to dashboard. It seems like dashboard won't actually be rendered. So let me actually see if I could create a fragment again. There we go. So dashboard is now rendered. So it seems like we actually solved it just now. So I think this actually does work. So for example, we have the landing page, and you might have a bunch of other pages too. Let's say services, and you can just have a component that renders a div that says services, right? Yep. Okay. And so yeah, these could be your guest routes, right? Because you probably might want to have guest routes. And dashboard will have the nav bar. And let me create one more route real quick. So let's do dashboard payments. And let's just do give payments. So this structure will actually set you up if you want to scale your front end. It'll actually be pretty nice because you already have a nice structure already. So yeah, cool, payments works, and if I go back to the home, the nav bar is not there. So I think this is a good way, a good approach to handle that. So glad we were able to figure that out so soon, so we don't have to worry about it later. I was actually a little bit nervous about that, but all right. So that's gonna be pretty much it for the routing stuff. So let's actually focus on getting Stripe to work, okay? Because right now like I said, we don't have any authentication. What we're gonna do is we're gonna focus on building out the entire front end. So that includes building out the actual Stripe form. Once we actually build out the Stripe form, then we can actually start setting up the back end so we can integrate payments. All right, now the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and install Stripe, the Stripe SDK for React. Okay, so it's actually very easy. You can just go over to documentation, and you can actually Google Stripe.js React, and it'll give you a lot of documentation. But I have the command over here, so I'll tell you guys what it is, obviously. So let me actually open up the terminal again. So we're going to go inside premium commands React. And the command that we're going to run, so for me, I'm going to use yarn, but for you guys, you would use npm. If you guys do use npm or if you use yarn. But I'm going to do yarn add, and I'm just going to copy these two dependencies over here. So it's yarn add Stripe. Let me zoom out. So it's yarn add at stripe/react-stripe-js, and then at stripe/stripe.js, stripe-js. So it's two dependencies, okay? You're installing the React SDK, and you're also installing the default Stripe.js SDK. So you need both. So I think this should actually be good enough. I don't think we need any TypeScript types for it. I think it should by default have it. If we do, then we'll install it. That's fine. Documentation gives you a bunch of stuff that you can use to get started. So we'll just go with the flow. Now, if you guys don't have a Stripe account, obviously make sure you create a Stripe account because you wouldn't be able to do this if you don't have a Stripe account. So make sure you create one. It's very easy. And the nice thing about Stripe is that you can go into live mode or developer mode. In order to go into live mode, you do need to activate your account, which requires an actual legal business, okay? But we're only going to be doing everything in test mode, but everything is really simple. Literally, all you got to do is just swap out the developer API key or the API key in test mode with the actual live API key. Everything works the same way. Okay, so when you actually are ready to release your application to the public, you can just easily do that. So there's a developers tab and there's a lot of stuff that you can do. You can literally play around with the dashboard to get a better understanding of how Stripe works, okay? But what we're going to do is we're going to go to API keys, and there's a couple of API keys that we'll need. So we'll need the publishable key. So this is going to be for the front end. So this is how the front end is going to be able to actually load up the Stripe elements and make the requests and stuff. So you'll need the publishable key, and the secret key that is going to live on the server. We're not going to worry about the secret key for now. We're going to worry about the publishable key first. Okay. And if you ever accidentally reveal the secret key, the publishable key isn't really anything super crazy, so it's fine because people on the front end can see it. Obviously, you can always roll the key, which will basically reset the API key for you. Okay, so we'll get our publishable key, and let's go back to the documentation and let's pretty much see what we need to do. So with Stripe, what we need to do is we need to import the elements provider, and we also need to import the load Stripe function. Okay, so like I said, it says the same thing in documentation. So let's go ahead and do that. So you can actually just import this at the very top level of your app, or you can just import it wherever you actually need it. So it seems like inside the dashboard page, we can actually load that over here. You can also just load it inside the index.ts file. Again, it's totally up to you. I think what we'll do is we will import it in the index.ts file, just because I don't want to have it inside any other components, just in case other components might need access to the Stripe elements, okay? And the Stripe elements is going to allow us to actually, render out the actual forms, okay? So what we'll do is we're gonna import elements from Stripe, and I think that comes from React Stripe.js, cool. We're gonna import load Stripe, and load Stripe is a function that is from the Stripe.js library. Remember, there's two. There's React Stripe.js and there's just Stripe.js. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to basically wrap our entire application. So I'll wrap everything with a router. We're going to wrap everything with the elements provider. And what we need to provide, what we need to pass in as a value is we need to pass in the actual Stripe promise. So what happens is when you call load Stripe, that'll pretty much load Stripe for you. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll call load Stripe, and we'll store that into a variable. And this is where we're going to need our publishable key. So like I said, you can just go to the dashboard. If you click on developers, click on API keys, you can copy the publishable key, and we'll just paste this in here for now. I would suggest you guys put that in an environment variable, but for now, I'll just put that over here because I don't want to restart the app in order for it to actually work. Okay, so this will return a promise. Okay, it's asynchronous, and we can just pretty much pass that as a value for Stripe. Okay, so now that we've done that, we can actually start using Stripe elements literally anywhere on our application. If you don't want to do this inside index.tsx, just make sure you do it in a component where you actually will need the actual Stripe elements. So if you only need it in the dashboard page, then you can literally do that inside the dashboard page. Okay, but what I'll do is inside the dashboard page, let me go back to the app. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to render out the form. Okay, so just because I'm kind of in a hurry, I'm not going to worry about styling the actual form itself, and I'll show you what we can do instead, just so that we can actually get a simple prototype working. Because Stripe provides a bunch of components for you. So one of the components is the card element, but if you want to separate everything, you can, and I'll show you guys how to do that later. So what we're going to do is we're going to import a couple of things real quick. we're going to need to import the card element component, which comes from the React Stripe.js library. And we're also going to need to import a couple of hooks. Okay, so let's go ahead and go into our code. I'll go ahead and create a component called, let's see, no, not one. Let's create, I'll call it a payment form.tsx. Okay, and inside payment form, what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and first let's just create the form real quick. Well, actually, I'll just use a div. Okay, and what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and import card elements. And you can see that there's a ton of different elements that you can import. So if we really, so later on, if we really want to build out the form that we had in the mock, we can definitely do that, because you can see there's the card CVC element, which is for the, actually, did I even put that? I didn't even put that. I don't know why I had zip code instead. But actually, zip code isn't even part of Stripe. Zip code isn't an actual Stripe element, though that is included with the card element. But you can, there's a card expiration. Let me see. There's a card expiry element, which you can use for the expiration date. But if you actually just use card element, that'll actually allow you to just do everything all at once. So watch this. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and let's import payment form. Now I think this is actually gonna throw an error. Let's double check. Okay, so it didn't throw an error, which is good. But there's a couple things that we should handle, of course. So you can see it's a little bit hard to see, but let me zoom in. You can see that we have the card number over here, so I can type in anything. And I can also enter in the expiration date as well as the CVC. Okay, we can actually also style the payment form as well very easily. I'll show you guys how to do that. So first, let's do a couple things first. Let's import the use Stripe hook and use elements hook. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to call these hooks. So const Stripe equals use Stripe, and then const elements equals use elements. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that these elements are actually working. Like, we want to make sure that the elements have actually loaded. You can see in documentation, before they submit the payment details, they check to see if the Stripe or elements object is actually truthy. If it's not, if either one of them is not, that means Stripe.js has not loaded. So you want to make sure you handle that. Okay, so we also do need a button as well to submit the details. So what we'll do is, let me actually change it from a div to a form. Let me create a button, and let's just say hey. So if I click on this button now, it should just send. But we want to actually do this. So we'll create a function, call it onSubmits, and it's going to be a React. I think the event type is going to be, I completely forgot. Let me see. I don't really remember all the events, but a nice thing I like to do is I like to do an inline function, hover over it, so I can see what the type is. So it's a React.form event on an HTML form element, which is good. So const onSubmits, so events, so it's going to be React.form event, HTML form elements. There we go. And I can just now pass this in with the correct event, with the correct generic event type. Okay, so over here, we're going to go ahead and call prevent default to prevent the default behavior of the browser. And we're going to check to see if Stripe or elements, if either one of them is null or undefined or a false value, we're just going to say Stripe is not loaded. Or actually, let me throw the error instead. Okay, good. And if it loaded successfully, then what's going to happen is we're going to actually do a couple things. This is going to require us to set up the backend later on, so we can actually save additional data. Okay, but right now everything looks okay. Let's actually style the this up a little bit. So there's a couple ways that you can actually style these elements. So you can either just reference the class, or you can actually just pass in props. So for example, there's this options options, prop, and you can actually pass in style. So you could do base, you could do empty. I think there's also an error as well, or invalid. So for base, we can do something like a color, and we can do like a white color, for example. Go ahead and see that real quick. Yeah, so there you go. Now it's a white color. Okay. I think you can add a border too, or a background color. Seems like we can't really necessarily add a border. Seems like it won't let us, but you can do a bunch of other stuff too. You can change the font size. If this doesn't work for you, you can even you can also, let's see, there's a bunch of classes that you can reference. So this is, let's see, yeah, let's see, the stripe element class. So if I go over to index.css, if I reference this, I can actually give it a border. Let's do 1px solid white. Let's see what that looks like. You can see that has the border now. You can actually give it padding as well, though I think you can actually just give padding here by default. 20 pixels. Did that work? Seems like that didn't work. I don't know if it has to be a number. Not sure why. Oh, I think it's because, you know why? I think it's because, let's see, padding. That should work though. Not sure why. It seems like that doesn't want to work, so we can actually just add the padding here. Pixels. There we go. So that's some nice padding, and then we can also just give it a border radius of, let's say, 5 pixels. You can see that border radius, though it's hard to see it because we don't have there's no margin. So let me actually do this real quick. Whoops. Let me give it some margin. Okay, cool. And yeah, like I said, for now we will just use this because it has everything that we need. We're not going to build out this form. We'll do that later, okay? Because I really want to just focus more on Stripe instead of the styling part, okay? But yeah, so we have a simple payment form that you can enter in. Okay, so what's going to happen is we basically want to allow the user to make a payment. Okay, so now the biggest question, how do we actually accept payment? Well, with Stripe, there's actually many ways that you can actually accept payment, and this is why Stripe is really cool, because it's really flexible, and it depends on how your integration should work, right? You can do many things, such as you can collect payment details and then pay later, or have the customer pay later. You can collect payment details and pay at the same time. It all depends on what you want to do. Okay, so what I want to do is I actually want the user to just enter the card details, and when they click pay, it pays. We are not going to be doing anything such as saving, you know, any payment, like any reference to that payment method, like from Stripe, right? We're not going to, you know, do anything other than just create a payment. Okay, if you want to do something like, you know, accept the card details and then have the customer pay later, you would use something called a setup intents. Okay, payment intents are what you'd use. Well, that's what it's called. That's what Stripe calls it. You use payment intents to, you know, handle payments. That's really what it does. But it's not something that happens in one direction, right? There's a lot of things that goes on when you are using payment intents. So I would highly recommend, you know, reading a little bit more about payment intents and understanding it, because it can be a little bit tricky. Okay, you can see right over here, there's this chart that I want to show you guys. So the customer is going to go to the payment page, okay? The client is going to send order information, and the server is going to make a post request with the payment intents, okay? So the payment intent is going to return new payment intent from Stripe to the server, and the server is going to give us back a client secret. So what's actually happening is this send order information. Essentially, let's say if you have a bunch of different orders on the on your front end, and again, it depends on your implementation, depends on your integration. For us, we really don't even need to check to see what the order is, because we only have one product. But if you have multiple products, right, you can send that product from your client to your server, and then on your server you can determine what amount to set, blah, blah, blah. So on the server side is where we can set all the prices, okay? So what happens is the server is going to communicate with Stripe, and it's going to create a payment intent, okay? And the payment intent does a lot of stuff. It can track charges, and it has different statuses too. Like, So it pretty much allows you to keep track of like the actual payment. Okay. Now, when we create that payment intent, it's going to have a client secret, and that client secret is what we're going to need in order to finalize the payment. And once that payment has been finalized, it'll give us back a payment intent with a status of succeeded, or it'll basically update the status. I know it's a lot, but trust me, once we actually implement it, you'll see how simple it is. Okay, so like I said, right now we don't have anything other than just a form that has a pay button and we can enter card numbers, but we can't do anything with it. Okay, and we're not going to follow this example. Let me actually see if I can find that over here. There was actually an original example that I had here, but we're not going to follow that because we're going to do this. A little bit differently. Okay, but pretty much everything you see here, we're going to follow that. But I can't. I think I may have just closed it by accident. Yeah, I think it's this one. Yeah, so you can see over here, in this example, all this does is it really just creates a payment method, but it doesn't really do anything else though. Like it just creates a payment method, but if it doesn't do anything like attaching it to a customer, and I don't even think you can attach it through here. I think you have to do it on the server side. But what we're going to do is we're going to do something different, okay? So I'll show you guys how that's going to be done. So we're going to step away from the front end, and we're going to go into the back end. All right, so right now I am on the back end. So what we're going to do is we're going to need to install Stripe for the back end, okay? So right now this page was for Stripe React, but we actually want just Stripe, the Stripe API. So let me go ahead and show you guys what you guys need to do to install that. And we'll also open up the reference just in case we need it. Where is this API? Let me see. Okay. Yeah, so just so you guys know where to find this stuff, it's stripe.com/docs/API. So if you click on Node.js, all we have to do is just install Stripe. So on the back end, it seems like we only need to install one thing, which is just Stripe. But since I'm using TypeScript, I will need to install the types, I think, as well. So let me see into premium commands API, and we'll do yarn add Stripe. Let's see. Okay, cool. All right, so we're using Nest.js, but honestly, you could use Express if you really want to. But I personally prefer Nest because I feel like Nest scales really well. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and set up Stripe. It's very simple, and I'm gonna show you guys how to do it the Nest way. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna first create a new module. Okay, so let's do this. So Discord premium commands, cd into the API. We're going to use nest g module, and I'll call this Stripe. So this is going to be a Stripe module. Okay, cool. So we have the Stripe module, and I'm actually just going to delete the app control.spec.ts file. I'll also delete the app controller file because I won't need that, and I'll delete the app service. And we'll have to go into app.module and we'll have to delete this. Now, I'm not sure why I'm getting this error. It's saying something about the tsconfig. I think it's complaining about this. I'm not sure why. Let me see. If I create a tsconfig file here, will that fix it? I don't know why I would want to read. No, it's kind of weird, but yeah, I don't know. Anyways, I don't think that's not really going to be anything important right now. Okay, anyways, let me actually... Just in case, let me actually copy this too, in case there's any errors. Seems like there's none though, but I just want to get rid of that. Okay, so we have the Stripe module, and what we're going to do is I'm going to create a controller. So to do that, I'm actually going to create, let's see, nest g controller. So I'll create a controller for us. So remember, the controller is going to be responsible for controlling the request. So that's what's going to set up all of our routes. So we'll do nest g controller. And I want to put this inside the Stripe folder, so I'll specify Stripe. And there's going to be a folder called controllers, and I'll just call this Stripe. Actually, I'll call this a setup intent. Because really what we're doing is we're creating a setup intent, so we should have the correct controller name. Okay, so that'll be setup intents controller. We'll also need a service too, so nestg service. Stripe/services, and then Stripe or not Stripe, setup intents. So we're gonna have the service as well as the controller. Okay, so that'll create a services folder for us, and I'll create a subfolder called setup intents inside services, and that'll create all of the files for us. Okay, you can manually create it too, but I like creating it with the CLI, and it also adds the classes and the providers to it. Now, there's a couple things that we have to do. One, we're going to go ahead and set up Stripe first inside the Stripe module. So that's actually very easy to do. So Nest.js uses something called Dependency Injection. So what you can do is you can actually use providers. So instead of actually creating instances everywhere, you can actually use providers. So that way that gets added to, there's some container underneath the hood that keeps track of all the dependencies that your project has, like the classes, the services, the controllers, and it'll just inject it in something called Dependency Injection. Okay, it's worth looking into. So let me go ahead and import Stripe. I think just do this. I'm not sure if I am missing these. I think I might be missing. Actually, no, this should be fine. Okay, cool. And yeah, this should be the Stripe class. So Stripe. Yep, perfect. Though I don't know if I need to actually create an instance of that though, or not create an instance, but destructure like this. I think I do. Yeah. So we're actually gonna have to destructure Stripe, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna say provide, and we'll call this Stripe. This is gonna be the token. Okay, this is the unique token that is gonna allow us to use dependency injection to get the corresponding value, and we're gonna use the use value property, and we're gonna create an instance of Stripe, and this is where we're going to provide the API key. Okay. So for now, I'm just going to hard code it. Later on, when we actually finish up this project, we're going to refactor and we're going to use environment variables, okay? So what I'm going to do is let me go into API keys, and this is where I'm going to get the secret key, okay? Like I said, you can always roll the key if it gets compromised. Okay, let's see. We need to provide the API key as well as config. Config, we need to actually just specify the API version. So there we go. And that should do the trick. So one more thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and create an interface for the setup intents, because we want to follow a pattern where we program down to the interface instead of programming to the implementation. Okay, so I'm going to create a class, sorry, interface, call I setup. Actually, wait, did I say setup intents? This should really be payment intents. I apologize. Let me go ahead and fix that real quick. Payment intents. Payment intents. Payment intents. Sorry about that. It's supposed to be payment intents, not setup intents. Okay, that's very important. So yeah, this should, let me just fix this real quick. So payment intents service. Okay. Well, it's actually both the setup intents and the yeah, you know what? I'm just gonna delete this and redo it again. I apologize about that. So let me just delete everything. Yep, sorry about that. I sincerely apologize. Okay, that should be fine. We just have to delete all of the references. Okay, so let me go ahead and rerun those commands again. Alright, so I'm going to need to cd into the premium commands API. And I'll just run the command. So let's see, it's the controller, so that should generate that in here. Good. And then the same thing with the service. Okay, so that should generate that in this folder, services. Good. Okay, so that's better. Payment intents, and that should be automatically imported here. Perfect, I like it. So that should do the trick. Let's go ahead and go inside our payment intents controller. Oh wait, I forgot. We need to create the interface. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to program down to the interface instead of the implementation. So in case we need to ever make any changes, because we program to the interface, we can just actually swap out the interface and we don't have to actually worry about the implementation. I'll actually do a video about that, explaining more about it. But I would highly recommend you guys Google what that means, because it's actually worth worth reading about. So for the interface, we're basically going to create a couple methods that the actual service, the implementation, is going to have to implement. So for the payment intent service, for now, we'll just have a create method. And this is going to return a stripe.paymentIntent object, okay? So now, wherever we implement this interface, we're going to need to implement that method. So implement payment intent service, and you're going to see we're going to have a red line. It's because we have to actually implement the create method, okay? Okay. Now, what we're going to have to do inside the service is we're going to actually have to call the Stripe API, okay? But first, let's make sure our controller works. Before we do anything else, let me go into the main.ts file, and let me actually let's do this. I'm going to set up the prefix, so set global prefix to API. So every single request is going to be prefixed with, we need to prefix the /API, okay? So this is no longer /payment-intent, it's /API/payment-intent, okay? So let's do a simple get. And we'll just do get payment intent. For now, we'll just do return hello world. Now, let's see. Okay, so it's going to give us an error because we haven't actually returned a payment intent. So what I'll do is, for now, I'll just get rid of that for now, just so it works. So let me go into the app now. Okay, so let's go to /API/payment-intent. There we go. Hello world. Perfect. Okay. Now what we want to do is we do want to make a post request to this to our payment intents controller. So let's set up a post request. So we're gonna have to use Postman to do this, to make that post request. And I'll call this create. So in order to actually access route, it's going to be /payment-intents/create or /API/payment-intents/create. And what we'll do is we'll call this create payment intent. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to need to call the create method on the payment intent service implementation. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a constructor, and we're going to use the inject function, and we're going to pass in the token. Okay, so what exactly is the token? Well, the token is what we had set for the provider. So right now we actually don't have a token. Okay, so what we need to do is inside the Stripe module.ts file, we have to get rid of payment intent service, and instead we're going to do the same thing that we did similar to Stripe. Okay, so that way we can actually use dependency injection. Because what you can do is you can actually just import the service and just create an instance like that, but that's not using dependency injection. You want to actually use the inject decorator. But to get that to work though, you have to actually set up the providers properly. So we're gonna do payment intents. Okay, so that's gonna be the token, and we're gonna use the use class property. And for the class, it's just going to be the actual payment intent service class, not the interface, the actual payment intent service class. Okay, so now what I can do is I can actually inject the payment intent service like this. So private read only payment intent service, and I'm going to type annotate it to the interface. Okay, so now what I can do is let me go ahead. And first, let me do this. For now, what I'll do is I'm just going to go ahead and return hi. And I want to show you what happens when I call the payment intent service. Okay, so let's refresh. It says hi. See how that works? So we are using dependency injection to inject the service into the constructor. Okay, so instead of actually creating an instance, because we don't want to do that, because the whole point of Nest.js is it actually follows inversion of control as well as dependency injection. So it's something that you want to take advantage of. All right, so let's go ahead and we can actually just get rid of this route because we're going to use the create route. What we want to do is we want to create the payment intent. So that's very important. Now, I do have Postman already, so we're going to use Postman to make those post requests. So let me actually change this to post. and we'll change it to /API/payment_intent/create. Good. So it gives us a 201, but we're not doing anything. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and inject the Stripe client. Okay, so the reason why, like I set this as a provider is because I want to use dependency injection. So anywhere that I want to use this Stripe client, I can actually just inject it instead of creating a new instance every single time. Because we could have just created an instance inside the service, but I don't want to do that because that's just redundant. Okay, and we want to take advantage of dependency injection. So inside the payment intent service, or actually, you know, a better thing that I could do is I'm actually just going to create one service. Let me actually do this. Here's a better idea. Let me go ahead and create a new service, and I'll call it, let's see. I'll just call it Stripe service. And this service is just going to have a bunch of methods that's just going to take care of everything for us. So we don't actually have to create them individually. So what I'm going to do is inside the Stripe service, and let me create the interface as well, so we can implement that interface. Okay, so we're going to have a create payment intent method, and this will return a promise of a Stripe payment intent instance. So we're going to implement the iStripe service interface. Oops. Okay. So instead of actually having to inject the Stripe client everywhere, we'll inject the Stripe service whenever we need to do something with Stripe. So that's the reason why I create the service. So what I can do now is I can do inject, and I can pass in that token Stripe. Remember, it has to match this token. And now we can go ahead and say private read only Stripe client. Or, you know, I'll just call it Stripe just to make it shorthand. And we're going to type annotate it as the Stripe class right over there. So if I actually were to reference this.stripe, I can actually reference a lot of the properties and the methods on those properties and any additional methods. Okay. Okay. So with the create payment intent, what we're going to do is we're going to just create a payment intent. It's actually really easy. Okay. If you want, we can refer to the actual documentation real quick to see how that actually works. Let me actually find that real quick. So yeah, there's a lot of documentation, and like I said, it takes some time to actually understand Stripe a little bit. Hopefully I'm explaining it in a good way. So to create a payment intent, it's actually very easy. You just have to specify the amount, the currency, and then the payment method type. Okay. So again, this creating a payment intent, it doesn't actually charge anyone yet. You're using it so you can charge them. So you're using it so you can finalize the charge. So, okay, so you want to create the payment intent, set the amount, okay, and then you want to specify the currency, the payment method types. It's going to give you the client secret, and that client secret is what is going to be used on the client to finalize the payment. So it's kind of like a, there's several steps to it, which is why it might seem a little bit confusing, okay, but once you understand the whole flow, it makes sense. So let me actually search up the documentation on the client secret just so that we can get a proper definition, because I want you guys to make sure you understand everything. Okay, so I'm trying to get the, not sure why it doesn't list the client secret on there. Okay, seems like it shows over here. The client secret of the payment intent required if a publishable key is used to retrieve the source. Okay, so I found it. So over here, the client secret of this payment intent used for client-side retrieval using a publishable key. It also says make sure you don't log it, store it, embed in URLs, or expose to anyone other than the customer, and make sure you have TLS enabled. And you can read more about this over here on how the client secret should be handled. But yeah, like all we're literally going to do is send this client secret to the client, and we're going to use that to finalize the payment. Okay, very, very simple stuff. And I'll show you guys how that's going to work. So what we're going to do is for the create payment intent. So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to return this Stripe payment intent, and we're going to create a payment intent. So it's going to require a couple of parameters. You're going to see that it's missing some right now. We need the amount. So the amount, we're going to set it to, let's see. Let's do, I think it's 9900. I think this actually resorts to $9.09. So I think we have to add I think 1 more 0, I think. I know there's a certain format. Let's see, yeah. The amount to be collected by this payment intent, a positive integer represents how much charged. So for example, 100 cents. So yeah, that's 100 cents, that's $1. So we want 9,900 cents. That's $99. So currency, we'll set that to USD, and payment method types, we'll do card. Okay, so that should create the payment intent. Okay, cool. So what we do next is inside the payment intent service. So what we're going to do is we're going to use dependency injection to inject the Stripe service into payment intent service. So Stripe service, I think that's the token. We will need to use that as a provider. So you can see that right over here, there's Stripe service here. We're going to create a provider, call it Stripe service. So I'm labeling it as Stripe service, not to confuse it with Stripe, because you don't want to have two tokens that are the same. Okay, so Stripe service and then private read only Stripe service, and we type annotated with the interface. Okay, so literally all I'm going to do is just call the prepayment intent method, and that will return to wherever we call payment intent service.create. Now that we have that call happening, let me go back here and type annotate this, the promise Stripe payment intent. So now we can go into the payment intent controller and watch what happens when I go ahead and call create. So we're going to go ahead and just return this. And if I go ahead into Postman, you can see that the payment intent was created and the amount was 99. So Nest.js actually handles everything for us when it comes to returning the JSON object. So we don't actually have to use the response object. Well, you do need to use the response object if you need to send different status codes. And if you do have the response object, like in the parameters, you cannot use return. It actually won't even return anything. Okay, so you can see that we have a bunch of stuff over here. Okay, we have the payment intent. You can see the object, the amount received. We haven't received anything yet because the customer hasn't paid. We have not done anything else aside from just creating the payment intent. Now let me see if there's a status. Yep, you can see the status requires payment method. Okay, but obviously right now we need to make the API call from the front end. So on the front end, what we're going to do is we're going to literally call this API using a post request. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the React app. Okay, we're going to go. Let's go here. I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call this utils. I'm going to create a file called api.ts. And I think I did install Axios already. So I'm going to create a function called create payment intent. And what we're going to do is we're going to create the payment intent. So Axios.post. I'll just hard code the URL for now. So 2001 API payment intents create. Since we don't have any authentication, not yet at least, we'll do that when we actually we'll get to the authentication soon. Okay, we don't have any authentication, so we won't worry about that. Okay, cool. So we're gonna call this endpoint. We're gonna get the client secret. That's the most important thing that we care about. Okay, I might actually yeah, we'll leave that alone for now. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we're actually gonna have to call it when the component renders, when the page loads. So over here, we're gonna go ahead and use the use effect hook. Okay. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and store the client secret in the state variable. We're gonna use the use state hook. So we're gonna go ahead and call create payment intent, and I'll just use a .then.catch, just because I don't feel like creating a function using async await. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call set client secret data.client_secret. Okay. Now that's obviously going to give me an error, which is okay. Let's see. Why is it okay, that's fine. I don't know why we do that. Okay, yeah, it seems like it doesn't want to work either. Type of is not assignable to that. Okay, that's kind of annoying. I don't want to type annotate it just yet, but here's what I'll do. Let me go into the React app now, and let's go ahead and see what's up. So the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna have to call this create payment intent function. Now before we continue, make sure you enable cores. So you can do that by just calling app.enable cores and passing in the origin. It's the same way that you do it in Express. Make sure you enable cores, otherwise you're going to get an error with cores. So inside the payment form, we're going to call that API to create the payment intent. So essentially what's going to do, what's going to happen is we're going to call the API whenever we click on the submit button. Okay, so well, first let's do this. Let's go ahead and get the card first. So let's do card equals elements dot get element card element. We're gonna check to see if there's no card, throw a new error. Card elements not found. Okay, cool. And what we'll do is we're gonna create a payment intent. So let's wrap everything in a try catch. So let's do try catch. So we're gonna call create payment intent. So const data equals await create payment intent. Okay, and we do have an async function, so that's good. And I want the client secret. So const client secret equals data. Whoops, that's not how I do it. It's data and then that. So it might be giving me an error because data is it says data is any type, but I'll just set it as any for now. Okay, so we have the client secret. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna use that client secret to finalize the payment. So let me just console log the client secret for now, just to show you guys that this is working. Because I really don't like writing all the code and then, you know, having you guys or not testing it one by one, and then you guys get confused. So if I click pay, you can see that the payment was created, so that's good. Now what we need to do is we need to use that client secret to finalize the payment. Okay, because what we're doing is we are trying to take the payment details from the client, and we're trying to allow them to pay in one go. Okay, we don't want to save anything. So what we need to do on the client side is we can actually just call a function. Let me actually show you guys in the documentation, just so that you know where to find this later. Okay, so there should be a confirm card payment method right over here. Okay, whoops. Yeah. So you can see that we can use the client secret. Okay, you can see in step 2, the client secret. Right over here, let's see. Yeah, so you can see on the front end, it fetches the secret, and then we use the secret to call confirm card payment. Okay, and that's literally what's going to happen right over here. You see that it says stripe.confirm card payment, and it passes in the client secret, and it passes in all of this stuff. And this is an API call that is made to Stripe, not our endpoint. Okay, the only endpoint that we called is our endpoint to get the client secret. Confirm card payment will actually call Stripe's endpoint. Okay, so like I said, everything that's to do with the payment stuff, Stripe takes care of that. Anything that's to do with like the card payment stuff. Okay, so what we're gonna do is after we get the client secret, we're gonna go ahead and call the stripe.confirm card payment, pass in that client secret, and we're gonna pass in the data that we need. So what do we need? We need the payment method, obviously. We're gonna pass in the card. We know that the card is truthy, because if it wasn't, it would have thrown an error. And billing details, so that stuff is optional. You don't need that in order for the payment to go through. Stripe will take care of everything. But let's say if your form has additional stuff such as the name, billing address, etc., you can obviously provide that. Okay, but we'll just provide the card, and this confirm card payment actually returns it returns an error. Let me actually see. It should return a couple things. Response. See, response. So it returns an error or payment intent. Okay, so error, payment intent. And if there's an error, we can throw an error and display it if we need to. Error. Let me actually, and let me also console log this. So that error will be caught down here. Okay, and if there's no error, the payment intent should go through. So let's test this out. So let me go ahead and do this. Let's go right over to our application. We're gonna go ahead and click pay. So you can see that the client SQL was logged, and you can see that the payment intent was logged, and you can see that, let's look at the status. The status succeeded, and that's good. Okay, so if I go over to the customers, or payments, so you're gonna see that a payment went through, but there's no customer object attached onto it. And you can actually see a bunch of payment intents were created, but they're incomplete. Okay, so you can see right over here that there is no customer attached to this. Okay, but that's gonna obviously get changed when we have the user log in with Discord. We're gonna worry about that later. But right now you can see that there's no customer. Okay, but obviously when we have the user logged in, we're gonna have their email in there and other details. You can see the other details as well, such as the payment method, the fee, the status, the ID. Okay, and what we're gonna have to do later is we're actually going to need to save this stuff on the database, right? Now, keep in mind that payment intents can go through different statuses. So if you create one payment on the server and that payment intent has been completed, then you can actually just you can either do this. You can save the payment intent on the database when you first create it, or you can just actually save it when everything goes through. I think it's better to actually just save the payment intent. Save the payment intent once the user actually pays and everything goes through. But you can actually just go onto the database. You can actually make an API call and just update the status of the user, so that way it can indicate that the user has been paid, that the user has paid. So we will have to obviously save something to the database at some point. So when we actually create the model for our user, what we're gonna do is we're gonna have like a status that says if they paid or not. And all we can do is we can actually just send an API request after everything succeeds, and we can just send that API request to the user and indicate and like update the status. So for example, the status can be like, you know, unpaid, and it transitions to paid once they have successfully paid. Okay, and when that status is changed, you can actually reference that status every single time to indicate whether or not the user can do certain things. So if we're building a Discord bot that should be limited to users, or it has commands that are limited to premium users, people who have paid, you can always just check to see that status. So right now, let's just do a quick recap before we continue, because I know it's a lot of stuff that we've done. So what we've done so far was we pretty much built our checkout form. We allowed the user to provide payment details so they can actually pay. Okay, and the payment went through. The problem here, the thing that we have not done yet, is we haven't set up any authentication. Anyone can go on this page right now and pay. Obviously, that's not good. We need to set up authentication. So in the next part of this video, what I'm going to do is we're going to focus primarily on getting our Nest.js project set up with authentication. And once we do that, we can actually set up routes on the front end so that we can actually only allow authenticated users to visit it. So I'm going to end this video right over here. I'm going to create the second part because I don't want to make this like, you know, too long. We're already at over like an hour already. But yeah, like I said, in the second part of this video, or in the second part of the series, we're going to dive deeply into Nest.js. We're going to set up the authentication. We're going to set up the sessions. We're going to set up Discord, OAuth 2, and all this stuff, and all of the database connections and everything. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And if you guys did, definitely please leave a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. And definitely leave a comment. Anyways, I will see you guys in my next video. Peace out.